All right, time to go teach. Hello and welcome to this episode of Tutors, continuing our unit on ecology and continuing our lessons on the nutrient cycles. This is part 3 of the nutrient cycles. Part 1 was dealing with water, part 2 was dealing with the carbon cycle, and now we are going to continue part 3 looking at the nitrogen cycle. So in review, right now we are on the third part, the nitrogen cycle. So we only have one more to go with the phosphorus cycle, which will be in our next episode. But for today, we are looking at the nitrogen cycle. So when we think about the nitrogen cycle, the first thing to think about is the fact that we are surrounded by an ocean of nitrogen. Nitrogen is the most abundant gas that is in our atmosphere. It's approximately 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. We're walking through nitrogen. Most of what we breathe in is nitrogen. But the key is, it is completely inaccessible to us. It's inaccessible to plants. It's inaccessible to all animals. It is just this massive resource that we all need, but we can't access it. We are reliant upon nitrogen fixation, which is going to occur by some bacteria. And those nitrogen fixing bacteria are going to take the nitrogen out of the atmosphere and they are going to convert it to ammonia. They are going to break down the nitrogen into a usable form. So that way life can use it. Now, not all life really wants to use ammonia. So we also then go to nitrification, which is also done by some bacteria, which are then going to convert the ammonia into our nitrates. And those nitrates are then going to be able to be used by some more plants and thus ingested by us because we'll be able to get that nitrogen from them as well. So animals will then be able to utilize this nitrogen because of nitrogen fixation and nitrification. That allows us to consume those plants or consume animals that have consumed those plants that have taken in that nitrogen that a bacterium has made available to them. And then we will release nitrogenous waste back into the soil, which the bacteria can then convert or use to make usable again. And that process will continue and continue and continue. And if we look at this chart, one thing to recognize is we're just losing nitrogen from the atmosphere. There's no return of that nitrogen back into the atmosphere. And that's why we require another type of bacteria, which is denitrifying bacteria. And denitrifying bacteria, they are going to convert our nitrates back to nitrogen gas, which will be returned to the atmosphere and keeping this cycle going. So that way we do not lose any nitrogen from the atmosphere. We stay generally stable with the amount of nitrogen that is in all areas, and we have the cycle completed. And for this cycle to occur, it requires these specific bacteria to actually make the nitrogen accessible and to return it back to the atmosphere. So in summary, we have these cycles that are taking place, and nitrogen, it requires those nitrogen-fixing bacteria. It requires the denitrifying bacteria. Otherwise, the cycle would not exist. So one thing that sets the nitrogen cycle apart from the other cycles is that it has very specific bacteria that allow for it to occur. Without those bacteria, you would not have a nitrogen cycle. If there was no life on this planet, we would not have the nitrogen cycle because nitrogen requires the bacteria to convert it into the different types, either ammonia or the nitrates, and back to nitrogen gas. That is the nitrogen cycle. And in our next episode, we will go through the phosphorus cycle. So until then, be awesome, stay awesome.